Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today delights in using the right side of her brain to write fiction and poetry after using excessive left brain work as a botanical garden director and nonprofit professional. Her award-winning Death in a Desert Garden is the first novel in the Bea Rivers series. Bones in the Back 40 launched this month in January 2023. She lives with her husband in the small mountain town of Silver City, New Mexico, as well as in Tucson, Arizona. She delights in the floral, fauna, and quirky characters in both locations. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Marty Eberhardt.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Marty, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
Well, I was an executive director of a nonprofit, as you mentioned, and that pretty much takes all of your energy and all of your time. And if you're also raising children, as I was for a great deal of that time period, there's no time for creative pursuits. So, I wrote poetry when I was in college. Then I started again after I retired. And then I went to novels.
Well, that's the story for most of us. Many of us were single parents working 2 and 3 jobs, and I was also the executive director of a nonprofit, and most of that is development, raising funds, and that takes a lot of time.
Boy, you got that exactly right. And I also was a single parent for part of it. My protagonist in both of these books is a single parent, showing what a struggle it can be.
Absolutely. My hat's off to all of those single parents out there. Once you wrote the book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to choose a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
I ended up with a small press out of Albuquerque. It's called Artemisia Publishing. I did a bunch of research into folks who would like my book, and I approached several small presses. I got another yes, but the fellow kind of wanted me to change my writing style and write kind of thriller style. And I am not, this is a cozy mystery. This is a gentle book. It has some humor. And it's not thriller-esque, and I wasn't about to change my writing style. But the publisher that I found had published another mystery by someone who had centered it in the Southwest, in the Four Corners area. And so I contacted her and I said, do you like working with Artemisia Publishing? She said, oh, yes. And so we had a conversation about that. And so I thought, okay, this is possible. And it worked. He liked it. And he was just starting to go into mysteries. So I was one of his first mystery authors.
Well, cozy mysteries are certainly a genre that that gathers a lot of readers, and so I think you chose correctly to write in that genre.
Yeah, thanks. I think a lot of us are picking up a book for fun and relaxation and entertainment, and that's what these books do, and your insides aren't going to get churned up by reading them.
That's so true. Sometimes when I read thrillers, I really truly dwell on it so much I can't sleep that night.
Right.
What do you think is the most difficult part of your artistic process?
Ooh, good question. Um, I feel like I have such a fulfilling life right now that as Hemingway said, keep your butt in the chair. That being really disciplined about writing on a regular basis and not finding all the wonderful other things that I can be doing in life right now. That's probably, honestly, the most difficult part of it. And I'm happy when I am doing it. It's just, it's a fulfilling part of life right now. I'm enjoying being a grandmother a lot. It takes a lot of time.
I agree. I think that writing after retirement is so wonderful, but my husband says you're supposed to be retired and you're in your office every day, all day working. So if it's not writing, it's podcasting or it's marketing, so we still have a lot to do even after we finish the writing.
That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think people don't realize how much there is to do once you have the book.
How did writing that first book change your process of writing? I know you've now published a second book. Was there a difference between the two?
Well, I guess the only thing that changed was I was familiar with my publisher editor, and I kind of knew what he wanted me to change in the first book. So I kind of looked out for that stuff, and tried to sort of anticipate those concerns. That's probably the biggest change.
Well, I know for me, I became faster. I wrote faster for the second book than I did for the first. And I don't know if that was just learning my craft on the first book and I could move more quickly on the second. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I was any faster.
What do you think was your inspiration for your first book?
Oh, well, there's no doubt about that. I always have loved mysteries. I have often read them in between weightier books. I read a lot of literary fiction. I read a lot of historical fiction. I read some nonfiction. And when I put down a really intense book, I'll pick up a light mystery just to kind of unwind a little bit. So it's a genre that I've always enjoyed. And it occurred to me that maybe I could make one up myself. And if I were to do that, I know more about the workings of botanical gardens than just about anything else. And it's something that a lot of people don't know about and I thought might be interested in. But there are also a lot of people who know about nonprofits, like you yourself said you worked in a nonprofit, and there are a lot of similarities with boards and staffs and fundraising. And so I thought that people who had experience with nonprofits would also pick up on some of the similarities with their experiences.
I think that it's a great idea, and I haven't seen any books really centered in that area. So I think that's a good angle for your premise. How did you determine the plot for the book? Was leaving those little clues throughout, the little breadcrumbs for a mystery, was that more difficult for you when you began writing?
No. I think I'm kind of a sneaky person. um, that part is really fun. It's funny that people say, "Oh boy, I'm partway through the book and I've totally figured it out who the murderer is." Right? I'm thinking, I bet they have no idea, and usually they are wrong, because I do like to throw in a lot of red herrings.
I love those. I love twists and turns, and I think I've got it and then I don't. That's always exciting.
Yeah, that's the fun of writing a mystery. It's the fun of reading a mystery. If you figure it out halfway through, not so much fun.
No, years ago I read Victoria Holt. Do you remember her?
I do.
And she always had the twist in the last paragraph. I mean, it would be like you would read the entire book and think you've got it. And she would throw that last paragraph in, and you just sit there stunned when you finish the book.
Yep. Now that's a particular talent.
It really is. What about your writing routine? Are you a morning or a night person? When do you get
I'm definitely not a night person.
When do you get those words on the paper?
I would say after about 4 in the afternoon, my brain is fried. So yeah, no, I often wake up very, very early and write, before breakfast. Yeah. So, and I will write around other things in the day. If I do some volunteer work, and, I will do right before and after that. It's, I'm not absolutely rigid about when I write.
Well, do real people inspire any of your characters? Do any of your friends think that they can see themselves in your work? Because I've always wanted to write a murder mystery and kill off a few people.
Right. Well, my former board members, I have run into a few of them since I wrote the first book. No one that I know who is a board member has read the second book yet, although I just did a signing and some of them just bought it. And they have kind of nervously said to me, "Marty, I'm not in that book, am I?" And I've said no, because actually, my characters in general are, like most of us, a combination of lots of people that I know. And I've known a whole lot of board members and a whole lot of staff members in my long nonprofit career. And so it's easy to put, pieces of them together.
I think that's the best way, is just to put them all in a blender and see what comes out. There are a lot of traits that are stuck in our minds, and until we actually start writing and watch them flow onto the page, we don't know that they're actually even there.
Yeah, and it's interesting how many people do think that somebody is based upon them when it actually isn't. That's sort of fascinating.
That is fascinating. The old psyche. Somebody could analyze that probably. I've interviewed some psychotherapists, and I said, I know all of their clients have to think that they're in their books.
Oh, how terrifying.
I know it. I know it. What about any publicity that's worked for you or that hasn't post-publication?
Well, the thing, of course, my first book came out, in October of 21. So pandemic was, full-fledged. And I had the good fortune, because this book was based in a botanical garden, of being able to do some readings outdoors in botanical gardens. Nice. Also in Tucson, which is not freezing cold in October and November. So that was helpful. So, and I'm doing that again now. So, I guess something that has been helpful to me has been able to do as much stuff outdoors as possible. during the pandemic. And because these are outdoor books, I think I have a bit of an advantage over some other people who don't have access to some of those places.
I think that's great. And, I love a theme party. So if you can hold it outdoors in a botanical garden, if that goes along with your book, I think, that's the way to go. I think all of our listeners can delve into their own books and find something that they can use to do the same. Are there any specific books or seminars or writing retreats or groups that you can share that improved your writing journey?
I really enjoyed going to the Left Coast Crime Conference this year, and well, actually last year, and I'm going to be going again this year, because it's mystery writers of all genres, and that's all it is. And supposedly the left coast, although the left coast is kind of liberal, goes to the Mississippi River as far as I've been able to determine. But so, I was in a cozy mystery symposium, and it was just wonderful to share ideas with other people in that genre who had been in it for a while. So I've been to a number of writing conferences, but that one was the most useful by far.
I agree. And I think when you can get with your own little group and then you can bounce ideas off each other and you just really feel like those are your peeps. I went to Women Writing the West because I wrote a contemporary Western, and I thought everybody there was writing Westerns. And I found out that, just like you said, it's everybody writing west of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different genres, but thank goodness it was a wonderful group, and it was nice to be with them.
Yes, and I belong to that group too. And what has been most helpful for me in that group is we've started up a mystery writers critique group. And so the four of us meet online because we're all over the country. And it's been, again, quite useful, although nobody else writes cozies, but it's still useful because they're good writers.
Yes, they were a very welcoming group, and I'm glad to be a part. Can you describe for us the editing process that you chose?
Oh,
they say writing is rewriting, and I don't like that phrase at all.
But it is true. I mean, I do a lot of editing. I write something once. I go through it, make sure it's not absolutely horrible. Then I put it away. The next day I look at it again. I edit that before I go on to the next part. Then, I kind of go back and I keep going back over the parts. And then when I've done the first draft, I don't send it to my publisher until I've done at least 3 drafts. So I do edit a lot. And then, then he sends it, and then we do the back and forth. So
your publisher has editors as well?
He's an editor publisher. He's sort of a miracle man. I don't know how he does everything he does. But yes. So he sends it back for 2 more edits. 2 edits from him. This last time I probably would have kept going. I don't know.
Well, I find that to be a problem. I got hooked on the editing process, and I went through about 6 editors I hired, and everyone would give me different input. So I thought I had to keep going. So I think sooner or later you just have to cut it off and say, this one's done. I don't know how those people who write
that's right.
a book a year can, keep doing, or one some write every 6 months. They'll publish a book.
Yeah, I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the passages that you've brought to share today, and then read from it so we can hear your tone and voice in the book.
Well, I thought I'd start in the beginning. When you read from a mystery, you can't disclose too much. So it really is one of those genres where it's a good idea to just start in the beginning. So I'll read a bit of this, and your listeners can get a sense. If you work in a public botanical garden and you're having a bad day, you can walk out the door and your equilibrium is restored. That's what Bea was telling herself as she went past the traveled part of Shanley Gardens with its manicured paths and themed planted beds. She wasn't in a mood to linger in the tropical greenhouse where things were blooming, despite last night's January freeze. She'd stop for a moment in the native plant garden, admiring the sun on the long, slivery spikes of deer grass cascading over some sharp-spined agaves, and then she strode out to the wild desert area. The garden's founder, Alan Shanley, had laid out some primitive paths back there in an area populated by jackrabbits, deer mice, and giant saguaro cacti, which stretched like a huge dance troupe all the way to the Rincon Mountains. Bea always found that walking caused her brain to engage. She was trying to resolve a dispute between two absolutely dedicated volunteers who were also quite dedicated to their own points of view about how meetings should be run. She found herself in this umpire position upon occasion, as her title was Education Director Volunteer Coordinator. Nothing that a refreshing walk couldn't make clear, she thought, as she headed to a particular tree, a big greenbark Palo Verde that would mark her turnaround point. But she was surprised to see her colleague Javier working in this remote part of Shanley Gardens. He'd clearly been fixing the old sagging barbed wire fence that marked their property line with the national park. When he turned towards her, she didn't even look at the shovel he was holding out because her eyes were caught by his expression. The lines in his kind, sun-weathered face were screwed into a grimace. He looked down at the shovel. She followed his eyes. There were a couple of ribs lying there, and Bea wondered for a moment why Javier, of all people, should be so disconcerted by an old deer skeleton. Then she noticed the bone at the back of the shovel. "It's human, Bea," Javier said, as she stared at what must be a lower jaw. "Can't be," she said automatically, and then she was silent as Javier carefully put the bone back on the ground and shoveled up a new one. It was the rest of the skull. He held it out to her again, and she stepped back. Not again, was her first reaction. Business had finally returned to normal at Shanley Gardens after a different body had been found on the grounds last summer. That was only 6 months ago. Liz Shanley, Alan's wife, had been hit by a falling eucalyptus branch. When it turned out the woman's death was no accident, the entire board and staff had been possible suspects. It would be utterly horrible if we had to go through all of that again. This is not happening. "Guess I better stop now and tell the cops," Javier said. His mind seemed to be working considerably more clearly than Bea's, which was in full-fledged denial. "I doubt it has anything to do with the gardens. It's probably somebody from ages ago, maybe an ancient Hohokam or an Apache or a miner or something. This place has had a long parade of inhabitants," Bea said, and then stopped herself. "Sorry." She knew perfectly well that Javier's family had been part of that long parade. They'd owned the ranch that was now Shanley Gardens, but had been cheated out of their property in the early part of the 20th century by a wily Anglo rancher. Alan Shanley bought the place some years later when the unscrupulous rancher went bankrupt. Alan had created beautiful gardens, but when he died, his wife had been quite happy to move into town and turn the place into a nonprofit botanical garden. That's probably a good enough place to stop.
Well, you've got us wanting more, so that's always a good thing, isn't it?
Hope so.
And I love your descriptions of the gardens, and you certainly know your plants.
Yeah, well, I do know the Sonoran Desert, and one of the reasons that I wanted to set the books in the Sonoran Desert is to share that love of the desert with my readers. The second book is not just in the Sonoran Desert; it also takes place in the mountains of Southwest New Mexico, up much higher at 6,000 feet, and I love that environment too. So I wanted to share that one too.
Well, I never thought coming from Mississippi with all the rains and almost a tropical climate that I would grow to love the desert. But we moved to Texas and I now see the beauty in the desert.
Are you in West Texas?
No, we're in the hill country. I have visited West Texas, and when it's in bloom, it really is a magical place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Marty, do you Google yourself or read reviews? How do you deal with the bad or the good ones?
Oh, I check out Amazon and Goodreads, sure, you betcha. And so far, with book one, it was, pretty darn positive. So, there was someone who said that I was a communist, which I thought was interesting, and I wasn't sure what book he was reading, but but I figure you got to have, one or two like that.
I think so. I think if we had all 5 stars, Amazon would flag us for not being
Mhm.
truthful with the people that we are sending to our sites or reading our
Right.
books. So you have to throw those in there. But sometimes you just think, wow,
What did they read?
what were they reading and why? Because I won't even review if I can't give it a 4 or 5 stars. It's just not. I'm not going to do that to anybody who has put their heart and soul into a book.
Yeah, that's actually the way that I feel, but I think and pretty much I'm that way about anything, even a hotel, but we are not all are not like that, like us in that way.
No. And we all have different ideas about success as well. What does writing success look like to you?
Hmm. Well, I never went into this to make money, and I don't expect that I'm going to be making a ton of money. Um, that's not it. It's respect. It's profession. It's respect from colleagues and from readers. Enjoyment, and if I feel that people are enjoying my books and that I'm professionally respected for a whole second career, you know, that's fine. That's good.
I think so too. And I think it's opened up a whole new community of friends for us as well. When we go to these conferences, these writing retreats, we just have gained so many people who are in the same profession as us and like you said, in the cozy mystery niche. And I think that's a wonderful place to be in our retirement years.
It absolutely is. Yeah, your brain's still very much engaged, and you're growing.
Yeah. Does your family support your career as a writer? What do they think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my poor husband's had to read so many drafts. I feel bad for him. But then
Well,
he's a professional biologist, and I have had to read some very dry biology papers and edit them. So it has gone both ways. And yeah, I think the rest of my family has enjoyed reading the books.
well, I have loved watching my grandchildren read the books and be able to take one to their school and say, "This is what I'm reading." When you ask us to choose a book, my grandmother wrote this book. So that's always a fun legacy to leave. Marty, as always, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are quite unique. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above?
Well, my advice is if you're having fun with it, don't get discouraged because, rejection letters are part of the process, rejection letters from agents, rejection letters from publishers. And it's going to happen. You will get rejection letters unless you're, in the 0.01% or something. I don't know what the percentage is. But, if you're enjoying it, keep with your voice, persist, because eventually you may well find a match or maybe you'll self-publish and maybe that's the thing to do, or maybe hybrid publishing is the thing to do. The good thing is we have options now. And so persist. That's my primary piece of advice. I'm guessing that's what most people say, is it?
I think that's good advice for all of us to persist. I'm interviewing people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they're still writing beautiful work. So I think this is something we can do the rest of our lives and gives us a purpose. And I love that. And I'm so excited to say that you're now one of our authors over 50.
I'm excited about it as well.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.